Hey, Foreclosure Fix family, and welcome to another episode of the Foreclosure Fix podcast. I'm your host, DJ Alojo, and I am fired up and excited to be here with you today. You have come to the number one place, the number one podcast, the number one source for great information if you're facing foreclosure. As you know, our goal is to help 1 million homeowners successfully navigate foreclosure. Now, if that mission resonates with you, please do us a favor, like, subscribe, or share our content with someone who you know can benefit. Or check out a copy of our latest book called The Foreclosure Fix, 12 Proven Steps to Beat the Bank, Escape Foreclosure, and Turn Your Property into a Profitable Asset. I am in a really, really good mood, y'all. I just finished lunch and I'm just ready to go because our topic today is all about zombie second mortgages. Now, if you haven't heard of a podcast, by NPR called Planet Money, it's a really good podcast out there that explains a lot of different money situations and the way money works, the way money moves. And on a recent episode of the Planet Money podcast by NPR, they had one that talked about zombie second mortgages are coming to life, threatening thousands of Americans' homes. All right. And in the podcast, they go on to talk about what happened to one specific lady. And the podcast is a podcast and it's also an article, so you can definitely check it out. The link will be in the show notes. But basically, this lady had a second mortgage that she had not heard from in numerous years. And she thought that the mortgage was canceled. It had been over a decade. It's been a long, long time. And she thought the mortgage was gone. She was paying on her first mortgage. Things were going well. She loved her house, wanted to be there, and was doing everything right. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she started receiving correspondence from somebody saying, hey, you have a mortgage and you owe us money. And after that, she just ignored it. She was like, oh, this has to be a scam. It's fake, whatever. I'm paying on my mortgage. She even called in to her first mortgage company to ask them, what's going on? I'm getting correspondence about a mortgage on the property. And, I'm paying you all every month. Why are you sending me letters? And the first mortgage said, don't worry about it. It's most likely a scam. Ignore it. And so that's exactly what she did. But unfortunately for her, she ignored it for numerous months. And eventually what she found were people on her front porch, people on her lawn, and they were actually in the process of auctioning off the house. And so our podcast today is all about these zombie second mortgages. What are they? What should you do if you receive correspondence about one? And do they really exist? Is this something that you need to be scared of or afraid of as a homeowner? And especially if you're facing foreclosure, what to do? All right. So we're going to dive deep into that topic today. But a few things that I want to do as you think about zombie second mortgages, there are always a few questions that people have and always a few things that we have to kind of go over at a very high level when you think about a zombie second mortgage. So for some of our listeners, this may not impact you because a zombie second mortgage has to be in second position. And you could also have a zombie third mortgage, or in very rare cases, a zombie fourth mortgage. And so the zombie piece of it is basically a mortgage that has been sleeping, a mortgage that you haven't paid on or done anything to. There can also be a zombie first mortgage. So there's some mortgages out there that are in first position because maybe the individual actually paid off their first mortgage originally, and now the second mortgage is now in first position. And that mortgage could still be a zombie, quote unquote. It could be sleeping. It could be a situation where no one's doing anything with it. And so the question becomes where does all these zombie mortgages come from? Most people think that, hey, if I got a mortgage, I know I have it. I'm paying it every month or things like that. But we have to go on a quick history lesson. So what happened in the past? If you all remember 2008, 2009, 2010, the whole kind of real estate crisis that happened in our country. And there were tons of different mortgages that were going around where people would have first mortgages and second mortgages. And then these mortgages adjusted in their rate. And we had this big debacle. If you ever Google what happened in the Great Recession, you will see that real estate was basically the cause of that recession. And so when all this was going on, there were second mortgages out there that the paper, which is the note and the collateral and things like that, that was supporting that loan just became basically like toilet tissue. They were worthless because of the fact that the property values had dipped so much. Some of these homes, maybe the total mortgage was $500,000, but now the property value was at $250,000. So imagine if you were in second position and your loan was $100,000 in second position and the first mortgage was $400,000, there was no way that you were going to get any money. And so during that time, when banks were doing modifications, when they were foreclosing in droves, a lot of these times, these loans that were in second position, where there was no equity, no real hope of getting that money, were charged off. And when they were charged off, that basically meant the bank wrote it off their books and said, hey, I'm no longer pursuing collections on this. I'm charging it off. And so the bank didn't care. They stopped communicating with you about it. They stopped sending correspondence to you, and the loan was just gone. It was out there, and you didn't have to think about it anymore because no one was asking you for payment, and you were just happy moving along and just paying maybe the first mortgage, or maybe you modified the first mortgage, or maybe you didn't pay any of the mortgages and said, hey, you can just take the house. I don't care. But regardless of where you were, that's kind of where all these delinquent zombie mortgages originated. And so you had all these big banks in the tens of thousands of loans, right, that were charged off. They just were poof, gone. Now, they were gone from the bank's balance sheet, but the loan was never paid off. And I'm going to talk more in the future about charge off versus paid off and why this is so confusing to so many people, because it's confusing to me. I'm in the industry. But essentially, where all these loans came from is that these loans that were charged off have now become loans that were bundled up into thousands and thousands of loans and sold for pennies on the dollar. And when I say pennies on the dollar, I mean pennies. I mean 10 cents on the dollar, 5 cents on the dollar, maybe even as low as 3 cents on the dollar, just because of the fact there was no value and no real chance of somebody going and paying off those loans. And so big other banks bought them, other big hedge funds bought them, other corporations bought this debt, and they basically said, hey, I got this debt now. I'm just going to sit on the debt. I'm going to do nothing with it. They paid millions and millions of dollars to buy maybe tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in loans, and they just are sitting on them. And now if you fast forward 15 years later, real estate prices are at an all-time high. The market has rebounded, and now these companies are saying it's time to pay the piper. Now I can actually get paid off on many of these loans that I've had shelled. And that is where these zombie second mortgages are coming from. And there's some big institutions behind this. They're not small little mom and pop organizations. They're big companies. And so that is the gist of the situation when it comes to zombie second mortgages. And if you do a quick search on Google, when you think about charge-offs versus payoffs, there's a few reasons why good-intentioned homeowners are getting confused. Because when I did a search on Google, it says a charge-off is an accounting procedure that occurs when a lender writes off a loan as a loss and closes the account for future charges. So if you have a HELOC, you're thinking, hey, you already wrote this loan off, you closed the account, I don't have anything to do with it. I'm done with it. It's gone. The other thing, when I look at Google, somebody says a charge-off means a lender or creditor has written the account off as a loss and the account is closed to future charges. I just said that, so no need to repeat it. But if you look at Google, you see it twice. It's right there. And so when you are thinking about this and when you are considering this from the homeowner's perspective, if you get a note or a letter from your lender saying your account is charged off, what do you automatically think? Oh, I'm good. This account doesn't exist anymore. You've already damaged my credit. It is what it is. I'm done with it. Unfortunately, that's not how it works in the real estate world. A charge off and a payoff are very, very different. And these are the big differences between a charge off and a payoff. When a bank charges off your loan, that loan still exists. What they do is that they stop the collection efforts. They're going to stop sending you statements. They're going to stop calling you. They're going to stop trying to get you to pay. They said, I'm done. You're not going to pay me. Don't worry. I'm just going to shelf this file, right? So that's a charge off. Number two, the borrower has not made any payments. You stop making payments on that loan as well. And so this is charged off. You stop making payments. You can't pull down any more money from your HELOC or things like that. The account is closed, right? The loan is still there. It's still in the back of the books. You can't transfer clear, free, marketable title to somebody else because that loan is still there. There is no loan cancellation recorded in the county records. And so when you actually do a payoff, which is what happens when you pay off a loan, the loan is no longer active. The loan is dead. The loan ceased to exist. It is done. Finito. Stick a fork in it. The loan is also canceled in the county records. And so if I am looking up your property and I'm a title abstractor, I can go on the county records and see on this date, you paid off this loan in full. There's a cancellation out there. And that is the big difference between a charge off and a payoff. And that's why so many homeowners are getting confused. And so many homeowners are thinking that that debt doesn't exist. And so the question becomes is, if you're a homeowner and you now receive correspondence from a lender saying there's a second mortgage out there and you need to pay me, what do you do? I'll guarantee you that the next podcast episode I drop will talk about how to spot scams and how to make sure that you are not being scammed by correspondence like this. But in the interim, I want to tell you, what do you do? The first thing that you do is think back to when you were taking out your loan. Did you actually have a second mortgage, right? Did you take that out? If the question said is yes, and you didn't pay it off, well, maybe this is true and you need to investigate. The next thing you need to do is make sure you contact your lender. It is so important that you contact the lender, contact the servicer, and contact the attorney who provided you the information. This is how you can find out if this documentation is real and factual. And so if you are in a situation where you're receiving correspondence about a zombie second mortgage, you need to make sure you take action. In addition to that, I work with a lot of different investors, a lot of different companies as an asset manager who play heavily in the second mortgage space. And what I can tell you from my experience dealing with homeowners is that you cannot ignore this when it comes to you. If you have a second mortgage, you need to know that the second mortgage can foreclose on you. I want to reiterate that because there's a huge misconception out there that only the first mortgage can foreclose on you. No, the second mortgage can foreclose on you. The third mortgage can foreclose on you. And so if you have a lender who you have received money from to purchase your house or to refinance your house, and they are contacting you about your loan, you need to communicate with them. You need to let them know what's going on. You need to create a plan, and you need to do it quickly. Do not delay, do not ignore, because it's so very important. And so as you think about zombie second mortgages, if this is the situation you find yourself in, you are not alone. There are other people going through this exact same thing, and there's help out there for you. There are tons of resources. As we always talk about, help from the federal government's always free, but there are tons of resources out there for you. And so just keep that in mind, that zombie second mortgages are a real thing, and you cannot let your house be taken by someone else because you ignore or think it's a scam or a joke. Y'all, that brings me to my favorite part of today's podcast, which is our bow tie round. It's where you, our listeners, get to tie one on with your host, the one and only DJ Alojo. The B in the bow tie round stands for my best advice for somebody facing foreclosure. The O stands for one thing I'm grateful for. The W stands for my wildest or most interesting foreclosure related story. The B in bow tie round, my best advice for somebody facing foreclosure is do not get caught by a zombie second mortgage. Make sure that you look back at your loan docs. If you have done a modification, make sure the modification was not just on one loan, but it encompassed both loans. If you only did a modification on one loan and there's an additional loan out there, make sure you get a title report. And a title report can be received very easily from a local title abstractor, or you can go to protitle.com or borrowingadvisorygroup.com. Those companies both can get you title reports, and you can review the title report to see if there are any open loans outside of your first mortgage. Or if you think your house is paid off and is free and clear, you can see if there are any other loans or liens or encumbrances on your house that could potentially put you in a position where you could be facing foreclosure. The one thing I'm grateful for today, I am grateful for the community of investors and realtors that I'm a part of. Every day I get to work with investors who are doing great things for people, who are beautifying communities, and realtors who are dedicated to the craft and the art of real estate. It is an amazing thing to be surrounded by people who really love their craft, but who also are helping push communities forward. All right. My wild or most interesting foreclosure related story comes from a story I told you some months back, and we finally are getting to a resolution. And this story, if I am candid with you, has taken over 2.5 years to develop. Yes, this foreclosure situation is on a foreclosure file in this great state of New York, and it has taken over 2.5 years to develop. We, as the asset management company, we're working to try to get somebody modified on their loan. And this person was just playing games. Every time we would come with a modification to the table, they wouldn't pay. They will stop communicating. They'll go MIA. And the attorney just kind of kept moving along and along and along. And they even had their own attorney. So this wasn't a situation where there wasn't communication, but both attorneys will communicate, but the borrower would not get their act together. They wouldn't do what they said they were going to do. And now 2.5 years later, we actually have a foreclosure sale date on that property. But guess what? As the foreclosure sale date is coming up, we also receive correspondence from their attorney that they have decided to sell the house, and they're going to still make a handsome profit. And so what does that show you in that scenario? One, that sometimes the foreclosure can make somebody take actions that they don't want to necessarily take, but it maybe lights a fire up under them. Number two, what it shows is that when you're facing foreclosure, you have options. They could have modified with the loan holder, but they didn't want to do that. They dropped the ball numerous times. And so they said, I'm going to actually sell the property. And so that property is headed to sale. They have a contract on it. The buyer of the house is very qualified. And the lender said, hey, because you are actively trying to sell this property, we are going to actually stop the foreclosure, give you 45 days to be able to transact the sale of this property and move on. And again, when you start doing what you need to do as a borrower, the lender is happy to help you get to a mutually beneficial outcome. And this homeowner is probably going to walk away with over $150,000 in cold hard cash when they close this property, which is a great day for them. $150,000 is a ton of money, and it's the resolutions we like to see. A homeowner who does not let the bank take the house, but they actually do something about it. Y'all, that brings me to the end of another podcast episode. If the mission to help 1 million homeowners resonates with you, do us a favor, like, subscribe, and tell somebody about our podcast, or check out a copy of our new book called The Foreclosure Fix, 12 Proven Steps to Beat the Bank, Escape Foreclosure, and Turn Your Property into a Profitable Asset. As always, I love you. I appreciate all that you do. And thank you for listening. We'll catch you next time. The views and opinions on this podcast are for informational purposes only and should not be construed as legal advice. If you have a specific legal question, we highly recommend you contact a qualified legal professional.